Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Today, I'm with Bryan Farley. He is the president of Association Reserves, Colorado, and has completed over 3,000 reserve studies and earned the Community Associations Institute designation of reserve specialist. He has 14 plus years of experience, including all types of condominium and homeowner associations throughout the United States, ranging from international high rises to historical monuments. Welcome, Bryan. It's great to have you on our podcast.
Oh, thanks. After a bio like that, I'm surprised you wanted to have me on. But yeah, I appreciate it.
I always call bios, they're like obituaries. You know, it's
right.
All the great stuff we've done and none of the junk.
I know.
So real quick, just give somebody a sentence or two on what Association Reserves does, because we want to get that out of people's heads so we can focus on freedom mapping, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. Yeah. So the simplest way that I describe it to people, if I talk too much about it, eyes glaze. So I try to say it's a real estate consulting. You have homeowners associations, cities, municipalities, districts. They have all this infrastructure. That infrastructure fails as soon as it's installed. So all that we do is we go in and we say, you have all this infrastructure. It's going to deteriorate or depreciate on a very regular basis. Therefore, let's budget for those expenses on an annualized basis now.
Perfect.
So you got to replace your roof. You have the money ready to go. It's a very simple budgeting tool.
And so that's the reserves part. You got to have reserves in place, and nobody knows what kind of reserves they need, because they don't know what the deterioration rates are on all these complexities in their buildings. And so you guys come in and do that analysis and say, you got to have X amount of money because within 14 years, your roof's going to need to be replaced. And 10 years, you're going to have a water problem, and off you go.
Correct. That's exactly it.
Beautiful. All right. So we got that out of the way, and we'll come back to that later, because we do want people to figure out how to get a hold of you. But let's start with freedom mapping. We use this concept of freedom mapping as one of what we call the 4 building blocks of any successful business. A big why, or what we call lifetime goals. What are you doing this for? The second one is a strategic plan for getting to your big why. The third one is freedom mapping, which gets us off the daily treadmill. And then the fourth building block is outside eyes on our business, which basically accelerates the first 3. So I just wanted to give context for freedom mapping as one of the 4 major building blocks of any business. We didn't make that up to sell stuff on the internet. We just worked with hundreds of business owners and now thousands. And that's what surfaced as the 4 things that people need. So let's talk about freedom mapping today, because that's something that has worked for you, has helped you. When you first heard that concept, what did it sound like to you? Or, I'll fill in the blanks on it, but what do you think freedom mapping was when you first heard of it?
Yeah. So to give context, I would not consider myself very much an entrepreneur. I was in my young 20s, and I just looked out, and it was during the recession time period. And I just said, things are not looking great right now. I saw people getting fired left and right. And I just said, there has to be something else out there. An opportunity came out for me to buy or purchase a business, and it was an affordable business. So we took a leap of faith, my wife and I, before we had kids or anything. And I said, let's just try this out. So I went to school I had a degree, a bachelor's of science in business, but it was great. It was a great education. But when the rubber meets the road, I just didn't know how to apply that to what I was doing. Right. And so someone at a conference that I was at, I kind of was very honest with them. I said, yeah, I just started out. I'm new here. I'm trying to figure and learn things out. He's like, great. You should try out this thing called 3 to 5. And I went to the meeting and read the book. And so what was really helpful for me was, again, as someone who didn't know what they were doing, I was able to open your book. And when I saw the freedom mapping or the process mapping section, where you just say, all I have to do is lay out each step of the way. And if you looked, I did it exactly as you had recommended. There was bubbles with every single step I had with the arrows. I was in every single bubble from start to finish. And then, of course, you start to say what was super enlightening for me was, and again, it's so simple, but it's so helpful.
Yeah, we always say this stuff is simple, but not necessarily easy.
Okay. And so you just assign a dollar value. You said, what do you want to make? So I assigned my dollar value. And so I said, okay, I'm paying this much for each one of these bubbles. So I had, like, let's say 20 bubbles or 20 spots that I had to do, from marketing all the way to collecting my balance payments, my balance due payments. And so I started assigning a dollar value to all those. And as you say, you start to realize that you're spending all this money on yourself doing these tasks when you could do it for a much more appropriate amount, whether that be whatever it was, $20 an hour, $15 an hour, $10 an hour even, right? Some of these processes that I had are not very complicated, but they need to get done. So I remember I did that, and year by year, it's just, that's the part that I think is so fascinating and extremely encouraging, that I would love to tell like everyone, but particularly someone who's struggling in this area. Sit down and do it, and then look back 5 years later and just start to see the growth that you've had. Again, I color coded mine just as you had recommended. So I believe I was red. And so now there's only one red box left out of those 20 processes. And it is such a great feeling, because now you start to see this business working as a true business, not as someone who is essentially like a cog in a wheel, where if that cog, in my case, where we had health issues in my family, we had emergencies. And so if I needed to leave, things would break down, right? Because I was a cog in that wheel that it needed to make sure it went perfectly. So I was able to take myself out of there. And now the business can actually run without just being one person in there. So that was why it was so helpful.
Yeah, well, I just love the way you've gone through that, because I find freedom mapping so important. Is why we call it freedom mapping. Yes, we use a traditional process mapping formula or format process for that, where you have the little squares of the bubbles with the arrow going from this one to the next one. And it's basically outlining a process. Here's what happens to begin with, all the way through to the end of the process. We use that to begin with on a macro level to describe what is going on in your entire business from your customer's experience. So your customer would first connect with you through advertising or marketing or some kind of social, you're connecting with them some way like that. They connect with you, then you start this process, and you go all the way through. You give them a price for the chair, you build the chair, you deliver the chair, you get the money, you develop a long-term relationship with them. All of that is part of this macro map that we build. And the reason we call it freedom mapping is because exactly what you talked about. This is the one place in the 4 building blocks where the rubber meets the road. This is the practical, tactical way to get yourself off the business treadmill and out of the day-to-day, so that you can actually do the things you love in your business and outside your business, if that's what you want to do. The objective of freedom mapping is to figure out how to make more money in less time, which is not what we were taught. That's counter-logical to what everything we've been taught. The only way to make more money, of course, is to get more involved in your business. Well, let's map our business and figure out how to actually get ourselves out of all these blocks and give that to other people or to processes or to systems, so we can make more money in less time. Freedom mapping is the how. How do I get off the treadmill? Strategic planning, the second. So freedom mapping is the third of the 4 building blocks. Strategic mapping is the second one. And that's more the what. What do I want in my business? And then the first building block is our lifetime goals and our big why. That's our why. So we got the why, the what, and freedom mapping is the how. It's the rubber meeting the road. And if we don't do that, we don't get off the treadmill. But I love your simple response to it, because it really is simple. We complicate this stuff when we don't. I want to walk through the steps again. You gave a great broad overview. I just want to walk through them a little more slowly this time, so people can see how simple this is. The first step is to build that map of your business. How do people initially connect with us? Then what happens? Well, they call us, or they email us, or they text us, or they hit us on our website. Then what happens? That's the third bubble. Well, we connect back with them. Then what happens? That's the fourth bubble. Well, we give them a price, and you just go through the whole thing. And we tell people all the time that if you have more than 20 or 30 bubbles on your macro map, you're playing Office. It just shouldn't be that complicated. But that's step number one. So how hard, or how did you find that process of just creating a macro map of your entire business on one side of one piece of digital paper?
Sure. Yeah. So your book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, you used a landscaper. And that's right. I haven't read the book like recently, but that's how clear it is in my brain, honestly. So you use a landscaper, and I just went in, I think I was in PowerPoint or like Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even complicated. I just made bubbles, like you can make a bubble like a shape. And I went through, I said, what's the first thing that happens? I said, well, a client reaches out for me for a proposal. That was the first step in my process. And again, it wasn't perfect, right? There's other steps now that I have, but very clearly, a client reaches out for a proposal saying, what's the cost of your service? Next step is I have to process that proposal. The next step is then I need to send that proposal. The next step is we need to follow up with the client to see, are they going to go ahead with our services? That's a yes, no question. If yes, we go to the next step, which is then we need to basically send them the information that we need, which is a signed proposal and a deposit, right? So I know it, like it's crazy because it's mapped in my brain. And so the other thing too, like, because you're going step by step, very simply, step by step, the other thing that I found to be so helpful is then you're able to go, okay, some of those steps like are not necessary for me to be involved in, right? Like sending the proposal, following up to see if they want to go ahead. So then, like you had said, you start to say, okay, well, what would it cost for that to occur? And so what happens then too is when you're hiring that next person, whether it be a virtual assistant or whomever it may be, you now have extreme clarity to say, here's your role and here's your task, and this is how I need you to do it. And so what I also did too is because I had that map, I was able to, I time tracked how long each one of those steps took me. And again, that was just one day. It wasn't like every single day. I was just like time tracking how long do these steps take me. So when I actually had to write an ad for as a virtual assistant, was my first hire, I was able to go on and say, okay, here's exactly the job description and here's exactly how much time it's going to take. So then I was able to budget very clearly because I had, like you had said, a map to simplify it. Because so many times I know when I started, it can feel overwhelming of what don't I know and what do I need? And I can't clarify what it is. But for me, that process, the freedom map was so clear because here's what I need. Here's the time it takes. Here's the cost that it's going to cost me. And here's the result.
Okay. So let me stop you there. So you made the map, and I love the way you were doing this. You were just simply taking the things in your head and putting them on a piece of paper.
Yep.
This is not difficult. We all know what our process is. The problem is with a lot of times we know it so well that we can't even describe it. It just intuitive. We just go through it.
Right.
Writing it down actually helps us realize, I'm missing some steps, or this is a really good process. And another great way to approach this sometimes is actually for somebody to do it backwards. The last step should be put somebody in your customer satisfaction drip process where you hang on to them forever. What's the step right before that? And go all the way to the front end where they find you on social media or what. That's a great way to slow yourself down to actually get the process out of your head. So you got this out of your head. And then the next step we talk to people about is let's put a color on each step. And the color represents not who does the step, not who does the task, but who is responsible for making the decisions around the task. So sometimes we might already have 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 other people, but we still end up with a lot of our own color on there because somebody else might do the advertising, but I'm responsible to make sure the advertising gets done. One of the biggest problems I found for myself when I did this, before I did this for myself, was I realized that in most of my 13 businesses, at least the first 5 or 6 of them, I regularly delegated tasks, but I did not delegate responsibility. So I gave somebody the task of making the shoe or whatever, but I kept the responsibility for all the things around making the shoe. I didn't believe they could have the responsibility. They weren't adult enough or experienced enough or fill in the blank. And that's where we get ourselves in trouble. So we color, the first thing we do is we color the map based on our, who is responsible for making sure this gets done. And usually what happens is just what you said. Yours was mostly or almost all red. Right?
Right. Everything. Yeah.
And I would tell people, pick a color you hate. Pick your least favorite color as your color, because we want this thing to be covered with a color you don't like, and it's yours. So when you saw that, it was all of yours, you probably, maybe you already intuitively knew that, so it wasn't a big shock to you. But how did it feel to see the entire map of, here's my business, and yeah, there might be other people doing things, but I'm responsible for almost everything. How did that feel?
Well, it's funny because it was just me at the time, right? Like I had bought this business. It was really, it's a consultancy. So it was just like a Rolodex. I bought a Rolodex, right?
Uh-huh.
And so truthfully, it wasn't overwhelming. It was, for me, it was good because I got to see, okay, this is all, here's the things I need to do. I can do this. That's how I personally felt.
Yeah, good.
There's things here and it's like the elephant, right? How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? That's how it felt here.
Yeah.
I just focus on these things. And what was really helpful too, again, I also want to say is maybe I'm jumping ahead, but assigning the dollar values. I know that's so simple.
Well, that's third step. We can go right to that. That's third step. So first step is build the map. Second is put the colors on it. And then the third step is sign in a dollar amount to every single one of these as if it was a 40 hour a week job.
That was huge because then I think the way you posit it in the book is every time you're doing this task, you're actually losing money, right? So for me, that was helpful to see that I'm wasting money, right? Because there's a higher, better use of my time in these other tasks.
Yep.
So then if I'm doing these tasks, I'm actually losing money. So that was really good to shift the way my mind worked because you start to not see it as being like, oh, I'm throwing money away by hiring this person. I don't have the money to do this.
I want to stop on that for a second, Bryan, because that one, I find that one regularly. I had that same issue. I call this head trash.
Okay.
That I had that same head trash that I was thinking, well, this would cost me $17 an hour maybe to have somebody else do this. I can do it in 2 hours. I can save $34.
Right.
But what I don't realize is I'm worth $200 or $300 an hour. And I just wasted 2 of those hours doing something at $17 an hour. And more importantly, it's about the decision-making around what I had to do. Even if it's simple, we only have a certain number of decisions, and it's not the task that wears us out. It's the responsibility. So I love that you were seeing that this was a way off the treadmill for you. This was not the highest and best use of your time. You're the $200 or $400 or $500 an hour guy, and everything below that is killing you.
Exactly. So I don't know how you then, like, if there's anything that helped me figure that out, because I am like a cheapskate in my own personal life. Like personally,
me too.
I'll just go to, and that's a struggle with my wife and I. Like, I'll go to the thrift store. She's like, no, you can't wear that. Right. So, but yet in business, that's not the way it operates. And I really had to get out of that mindset of, yes, I can do this task faster, better. But what I found is exactly what you had said. Then I am always a slave, essentially, to having to always be responsible for that. Whereas I can hire someone who's probably better than me at that task, more efficient than me at that task, and enjoys that task potentially because they have a gifting in that area potentially. And then they're going to excel at it and then teach me something. Like that's what's been really, really helpful.
Yeah. So let me give a formula, because there is a formula for a pretty simple mathematical way of figuring out what I'm worth. Let's say you want to make $200,000 a year. Well, that at $2,000 or 2,000 hours during a year, that's $100 an hour. But nobody's going to bill for all 2,000 hours. You're probably going to bill for less than half. So it's probably $200 to $250 an hour to get to $200,000 a year. That's what you're worth. Might even be $300. Might be 1/3 of your time could be billable. So somewhere between $200 and $300 an hour is what you're worth. So if you want to make $400,000, then you're probably billing at $800. And so that's what we put on the piece of paper for ourselves. And then we can kind of get close with everything else. What would it cost to have somebody do my social media and answer the phones? And clearly none of that's going to be anywhere near $100, $200, $300 an hour. So that's the way people should approach this. The most important one of these numbers to figure out is your own. What am I worth per hour? And then everything below that, I got to figure out how to give that to somebody else, and then go do those $100 to $200 to $300 an hour tasks. And in 1 hour of $300 work, you can pay for a week of somebody working at $15 or $18 an hour. and get some more time off.
Right.
So that's the formula.
Right. And so what you just did there, which is like actually interesting, because when you explain that to me in your book, right, you're just starting with the end in mind, right? Like Stephen Covey's idea of just starting the end in mind. Well, what is it I want to make, right? Now, not everyone can say, I want to make, like, obviously, realistically, what's a proper amount that you can make in a year? But then you just work backwards from there. So you demystify it, you simplify it, and you go, okay, it actually is a mathematical formula with how many hours I can work, what are my rates I can charge. Therefore, here's what it is. So you're able to then make it less like ethereal or like just out there, ubiquitous, or what's the right word? I'm gonna
fuzzy, esoteric, fuzzy.
Yeah, fuzzy. That's a better way of putting it. It's just like fuzzy out there. Whereas you now solidify it and you're saying, here's what it is. Here's what I can charge. Here's the terms to it. And then this is where I'm now seeing the fruits of my labor and can systematize it.
Yeah. And the other part of this is that if you get somebody else doing something for $20 an hour and you put it into your billing formula at $35 an hour, which is or even $40 an hour, doubling the cost is not unreasonable. A lot of people will triple the cost. If the labor is $20 an hour, then you put it into whatever your formula is for making shoes or consulting as $60 an hour. Then there's built-in profit to that as well. So you're not paying $20 an hour. You're actually making 10 or 15 or $20 an hour, and you're not doing anything. And that begins to create the environment where you can make more money in less time by giving away the things that are not the highest and best use of your time. And your point is, you give that to somebody who's really good at it at $20 an hour, and they get it done better, faster, cheaper than you would when you're doing it yourself, and you learn from them.
Right. Well, your clients notice it as well. So like, that's the thing, is we've touched on how it helps the owner, but it actually benefits your clients who you're serving, right? Like for me, I'm a service business. So my clients then notice the improved service, the improved response time, which is really important for us, the improved just getting things done timely.
We're running out of time. I want to get to the fourth step. The first step is make the map, the macro map. We can talk about micro maps on a different podcast, which are for a different thing, but you make a macro map of your whole business from the beginning to the end of the relationship. Then you color it, then you put the hourly on it. And then the fourth part of that is to put the new map that you've just seen against the existing map. Here's where I want to be. Well, I'm skipping a step. The fourth step here is to actually create, redo the colors and put on there which ones of these should I actually own. So right now I own all 20 of the steps. What should it look like when I'm at my ideal lifestyle? And you get to where maybe 4 or 5 of those 20 are still your responsibility, and the others are tasks and responsibilities of other people. And then the fifth step is you put those 2 maps side by side. Here's where I am right now. Here's where I want to be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now. And then you begin to eat the elephant. The sixth step is you begin to eat the elephant one bite at a time. Which one of these steps can I give to somebody else, or buy a piece of software for, or just stop doing? And how did you find that process when you started eating the elephant one bite at a time?
Just helpful, right? I mean, it was amazing how all of a sudden it's not uncommon for most people when they start off to be working like ridiculous hours, 80 whatever hours, and you're just overwhelmed and you're tired and you're stressed. Definitely, there were times where it was tough. And so all of a sudden, just getting back some of those hours meant that's more time to hang out with my newly born child, right? With my wife. I was able to be more available. Like that to me was my big why, right? I wanted to be with my family. And so one by one, all of a sudden, and it was such a good feeling of like a burden off my shoulders, like more than I can really even describe, of having you, again, not that the business was like a burden, but you start to get stuck. And I remember my office, I was in a basement. That's all I could afford. And you're just stuck there all night. And you're just like, I want to go home and have dinner with my family. And then all of a sudden now I have an extra, potentially 2 hours is all I got. But that 2 hours is meant I can go home, have dinner with my wife and my newly born child. So,
and now you're making more money in less time.
Correct. It was huge.
So today you've got a real company. You got quite a few people working for you and with you. And And you moved your ideal lifestyle. You moved from Denver to California because you wanted to be closer to the ocean and enjoy other things in life. And so you've been able to create this environment where you make more money in less time. You did this from freedom mapping.
Yeah, one of the steps. Obviously, I never want to just say, hey, I always want to be sensitive to say there's so many factors and variables in any business, right? I never want to be like, yeah, just do this 2-step, 3-step plan and you'll be
never that easy.
Right. But yes, it was extremely, again, it's the tools in the toolkit so that you can start to think through these. Again, fuzzy is the way I would describe it. It's a great way to put it and make it clear.
Yeah. And we can finish with this mindset. Clarity is power. And when we understand where we are with the map we have today of our existing responsibilities and where we want to be in 1 or 2 or 3 years, we've got clarity. And now we can begin to see which one of these steps can I get rid of first. And I'll give people a quick insight. When I first did this, I got 3 or 4 steps off my plate in like a month. I thought, man, this is great. I'm going to have freedom in 6 months. And then the 4th step took me like 6 months all by itself. To your point, life is messy. But I still always had clarity. I knew once I get past this step, I know exactly what the next thing is I need to do to get freedom in my business. So I never have to sell it to get freedom from it.
Totally.
I appreciate your clarity, your simplicity in attacking this stuff. And I love that you simply went through the steps. Too often we torture this stuff. We try and add a whole bunch of things to it. We overthink it, and it really doesn't have to be that way. We really do have about 5 or 6 steps to freedom, and we can eat this elephant one bite at a time and get there in 1 or 2 or 3 years, no matter what business we're in. So do you have any parting thoughts for people, questions or anxieties or learnings around this?
Yeah, I would say exactly what you just reiterate that last point you made. Just take 5-10 minutes, just do it, write it down on a piece of paper, on like a Post-it note, whatever. If that's what you got, please do it. And then with any other task that you have too, like it's just doing it. See if you can do it once, so you never have to do it again. Whether it's someone's always asking me about this one process in that process map, make a video, and then that way you never have to tell them again how to do it. They can always refer to it. So just as you said, just do it. Yeah. That is the way to go.
Brilliant. How can people get a hold of you to get help with their HOAs or their government infrastructures where they have no idea how much money they should be saving?
Yes, if you would like to go to our website, that's probably the best resource. It's going to be reservestudy.com. Reservestudy.com is where you're going to have all the resources you need to contact me or to get more information.
Bryan, it's a delight to be with you. I love talking to business owners who have figured out how to get off that treadmill, and I'm excited about your continuing future.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
That wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.